Welcome to Keith Knight, Don't Tread on Anyone. Antiwar.com, Dave DeCamp reports Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday strongly warned the U.S. against allowing Ukraine to use NATO missiles in long-range strikes inside Russian territory, saying the move would put the Western military alliance at war with Russia. Unfortunately, this is where we are in this state in the game. Best thing that I think we can do is really get together and make it very clear to people that public opinion stands on behalf of no war with Russia or China or Iran. On to discuss the Rage Against the War Machine rally, September 28th of 2024 from noon to 5 p.m. is the organizer of the rally, Angela McArdle. Angela, if I want to find more about this rally, where do I go?
You can go to rageagainstwar.com.
Terrific. I am curious, why are you anti-war?
I think we just had the anniversary of it, right? The September 11th attacks were the first thing that really freaked me out about war. It was my first year of college when that happened. And I remember being just like really, it was like a real sobering paradigm shift for me. It was not something that I'd normally paid attention to. I was in elementary school during Operation Desert Storm, and I was like 6 or 7 years old at the time. But that was a real kind of freak out moment for me too. As like a little kid, just watching it, come through the speaker. What is it called? The when the president speaks or the principal speaks on all the...
Oh, just the loudspeaker.
Yeah, the loudspeaker in school, how it's going down, and we're Operation Desert Storm, and we have to have a moment of silence because people are dying. It was just like, I don't know why more people aren't bothered by war. I don't really know what the answer to that is. I think that people have really busy lives and they just don't have the psychological bandwidth. But for me, and I think most people who are really anti-war, the thought of people in our country being enlisted into the military and shipped overseas to kill a bunch of people that they don't know is pretty horrendous, and a really freaky thing too. I just don't know how to really make sense of it when I sit down and think about, like, people enlist and they want to serve their country, and somehow that translates into killing a bunch of people they've never met overseas. That's a really disturbing thing, and I assume I'm anti-war because I just think those sort of things are horrendous.
That is awesome. Just not having double standards. People clearly see it as immoral when done on a small scale and done within their own country. Murderers should get life in prison. Well,
Yeah.
what if they organize? What if they all put on camouflage? And what if they're taking orders from someone? It's like, well, in that case, actually, they deserve admiration.
Then it's
Uh,
heroism. It's very strange to me.
Historically, Democrats have been totally pro-war. Woodrow Wilson in the First World War, Franklin Roosevelt in the Second, Harry Truman going into Korea, Lyndon Johnson, significant escalations in Vietnam, Barack Obama in Libya and Syria. So let's assume that the elites of both parties are run by the deep state and they're going to be pro-war. Why should Democratic voters, people currently supporting Kamala Harris or who are on the left but feel politically homeless, why should they be anti-war if they see the world as sort of competing oppressors versus oppressed? They really care about the well-being of the working class and don't want to see vulnerable people exploited. Why should they be anti-war?
I mean, I think I kind of summed it up, maybe a little slowly and a little awkwardly with the first thing we talked about. It blows my mind that people want to see other people murdered overseas for things that have nothing to do with them. The Ukraine, Russia stuff, the stuff in Gaza, there's a lot of complicated geopolitical things going on. Why does it end up so that we're murdering massive amounts of people? I feel like a party that says that they care about people, that they're very interested in healthcare, right? Being healthy. I feel like being alive is like the basic foundational component of being healthy. You care about making sure people are paid enough, that there are social safety nets. I just feel like being alive is just like the default, like bare minimum that we could do. If Democrats are supposed to be the party of caring, about other people, it is really confounding how every time they fall in line behind presidential candidates who are just hell bent on blowing up other parts of the world. I assume that it's because war and the anti-war position is just used as a prop by different presidential candidates, and so the Democrats of the early 2000s who were anti-war, I think they were really more anti-George Bush. I really do think they were more anti-George W. Bush, and they were really mad about something he did. And certainly there's always going to be, like honest, dissident left actors, people who are truly anti-war and part of the anti-war movement. But those are people who maybe happened to vote Democrat. They're not people who I think of as dyed-in-the-wool Democrats.
Well, I mean, the vice president the other day on the presidential debate stage said she was proud to have 200 Republicans who worked with George Bush and Mitt Romney supporting her, along with John McCain. She's saying that she worked with them, and the endorsement of Dick Cheney. She's bragging about this as opposed to trying to cover it up. It seems like anyone who really cares about the working masses can totally see this blatant Democrat neocon alliance. I witnessed that, maybe I'm just imagining it, but Dave Smith went from being very good on the anti-war position, and then after he had kids around this time, he went from being very good to being damn near perfect, so passionate, hating this evil war machine. Went from like, well, there are negative unintended consequences, including blowback, to this is evil mass murder of innocent human beings. And I really just love that about him. Did having a child really escalate the amount of passion that you face when it comes to military conflicts?
Yeah, I think so. One of the more recent, really visceral moments for me was seeing Justin Amash post. Oh man, it's so rough. Post a photo of his dead baby cousin George, who, he has family. They were in Palestine and they were hiding in the Orthodox Church, and the Israeli government bombed the shit out of this Orthodox Christian church and killed everybody in it, including like mothers and babies. And this photo is not of some person that we have no way of verifying. Justin Amash is a libertarian former congressman, and you just see this like sweet baby, like asleep, covered in ash and rubble, dead from being bombed. And there's just one degree of separation there. It's not like some conspiracy. It's not government propaganda. It's someone I know and have shaken hands with saying, the Israeli government just murdered my family. I don't know what could be more radicalizing. And think about from the perspective of, like when Ron Paul talked about blowback when he had his Giuliani moment, like it's very real to imagine a government you've never had any interaction with. They should have nothing to do with you. You've never done anything to them. And they come over to where you live, and they don't just like kill someone. They just completely obliterate everything you know. The landscape looks different. You're complete shell shock, fire shock. Everyone's dead around you, and your world is never the same. It's really insane to think that the Israeli government would not just like do that, but they would do it again and again and again. And they intentionally target children. It's the most barbaric, animalistic. I can't watch it on National Geographic when animals do it to each other. And that's just like animals. They got to eat. I really can't wrap my head around how one human being gets to the point where they're in the control room making a conscious decision, and then they're doing it 5 or 6 more times and reporting on it like it's a good thing.
It is just really unbelievable. And that's why the libertarian message, which you are promoting, which I'm so grateful for, is so vitally important, because people have like such selective empathy. They're like, what Hamas did on October 7th was terrible. Well, and Israel is just defending itself. And murdering 100,000 Japanese people in one day. Well, actually, that was part of a bigger strategy, and that's justifiable. It's like, can we just stop having principles that consist of people in this geographical area are good and this geographical area are subhuman scumbags, until,
Yeah.
of course, we're in alliance with them. That's why libertarians, instead of having this country divide or political party divide, really have the divide of there are justifiable actions based on consent, based on self-ownership and social cooperation, and then there's violence. And regardless of which group engages in it, we have the same principle. That's why I think what we're doing is brings such a unifying message to the entire human race, Americans, Russians, and people in China. So let's talk to Republicans. Republicans frequently will say that, well, we have to be strong. We have to really make sure that we have a lot of military equipment, a heavily funded military, and we let everyone know that we are ready to go to war at the drop of a hat. This way, that keeps other countries in line and preserves our freedom. What do you say to Republican voters who are maybe leaning in this anti-war position, or they're explicitly pro-war, people like Ben Shapiro?
I mean, for people who are pro-war, I think the most gracious stance to take it is you've been deceived. This is not, for people who are Christians, maybe also for people who are Jewish, like, this is not God's will. It is not to murder women and children. I think especially for Christians, I'm not Jewish. It's harder for me to message to Jewish people from a religious or, like a God-centered perspective. But there's just nothing godly about murdering women and children. We're not in a place where we're all, this is not 2,000 years ago. There's not a horde of people who are coming to murder you with spears and swords. That's not the way anything is working right now in the Middle East. There's a lot of technological advancement. We are all civilized societies. There are plenty of people who don't like each other and hate each other because of long years of history. But we also have the fortitude, the will, the technological advances, and, help with partners, international partners, to find peace. It's not always going to be perfect, but for conservatives who are just like, oh, well, we just got to kill them because they hate our freedom. Like, it's all written down. I mean, like, this book by Scott Horton, like, you could just skim it. You could just skim the first, like, few pages and basically figure out the history of it. You don't even have to read the whole thing. It's not super thick, but the information is out there.
Yes, my first introduction to Scott Horton was the previous book titled Fool's Errand: Time to End the War in Afghanistan. And in that book, I was surprised to hear him make the case that the war in Afghanistan was completely unnecessary. He cites Haji Abdul Kabir, the deputy prime minister of the Taliban, who said, look, we don't want some war with America. We're just trying to be domestic imperialists and violently rule the people of Afghanistan, just like the deep state's trying to do to Americans. We don't want a war. That's a big headache. We'll hand bin Laden over to any third country to avoid this conflict. And George Bush rejected the offer. They said, we will hand him over so long as we see evidence that bin Laden was involved in a conspiracy to use planes to attack the World Trade Center. Bush didn't take him up on it. And 20 years of the war in Afghanistan, trillions of dollars, tens of thousands of civilians, the Taliban took over after 11 days. So that is so much for them saying, oh, you libertarians, oh, don't go to war.
Yeah.
You're living in a fantasy land. This is the real world. The real world is allying with Al-Qaeda in Syria against Assad.
Yes.
It's allying with Al-Qaeda in Libya, the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, against Gaddafi's regime. That is real world.
And I think a lot of the people who have been doing this in these administrations for like over decades now, I think they're so caught up in it that they're just like, oh, okay, then we're at the war over here. Oh, okay. They're not even thinking about like what, like what is really happening. Like people are getting blown up. I feel like they view it like a DMV desk job. Like everybody should just get plopped down there for 72 hours and then come back and rethink their life. I feel like that should be like, if you're going to be in charge of any job where people get blown up, you get to go spend 72 hours in that environment before you decide, to before you have the privilege, the duty of murdering people overseas. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you know what? That is actually a funny metric. All right, there's the new 72-hour law. You got to be there. It's like if you start a restaurant and refuse to eat the food, that tells me you don't really think it's that good of a restaurant. If
right.
you start a war and refuse to go there, well, it certainly seems you realize that tensions have escalated unnecessarily and it's too much of a danger zone for other people as
Yeah.
well.
And I
Um,
mean, like, certainly there's a lot of just disconnected bureaucrats just doing, like crappy murderous things. But I do think that people like Dick Cheney, like Bill Kristol, they are architects of evil. I do think they know exactly what they're doing. Um, I pray to God that their hearts are changed. But there are definitely people who are doing it. They have there is bloodlust to their agenda. I don't really know how a human being gets to that point, but they're there.
Oh yeah, well, it's the psychopathy of the inability or unwillingness to engage in common sense empathy.
Yeah.
Cheney and Crystal certainly appear to have it, along with Sullivan, Blanken, and Victoria Newland.
Yes.
Um, and it's not even like a real Republican, like die in the wool history. Uh, President Eisenhower invited Nikita Khrushchev in 1959 to tour from New York City to Los Angeles, and they were able to shake hands. Richard Nixon went to Beijing and shook hands with Chairman Mao Zedong. This is what the Republican Party used to be, totally capable. Not to
Yep.
mention President Trump shaking hands with Kim Jong Un against the advice of John Bolton at the time.
Absolutely.
We have no reason to make enemies out of either the politicians, especially the domestic population in these geographical areas. We are all God's children. Anything else you'd like to say to Republicans? Oh, one more thing. It turns out "Thou shalt not murder" is from Exodus 20:13. I don't know much about the Bible, so it turns out Jews and Christians can unify on this "Thou shalt not murder"
There you
message,
go.
and
There
they
you
can
go.
refer to 2,000 years of history.
Very
Anything
nice.
else you would want to say to Republicans, either Trump supporting populist Republicans or even people who are sympathetic to Bush and Cheney?
I'd say anti-war is a pro-family position. If you love kids, if you love families, if you want to see conservatism flourish, here, abroad, wherever, being anti-war is a great way to do that.
When it comes to using a message to unify all Americans, so we've talked about here's what I'd say to Democrats if I had their attention, here's what I'd say to the Republicans. If you're speaking and you're sort of, say, the MLK, or if you'd want to give a message to a popular reverend or something, what is a message that we can use to unify both native born Americans as well as immigrants, Democrats, Republicans, uniting the races, bringing the genders together? Why do you think anti-war is a potentially unifying message, and how would you deliver it to people in general?
I think we need to talk about how being anti-war is good for the economy. It is good for families, right? It is good for gay people. It is good for conservatives. Like there's nothing ideologically extreme about wanting to see human beings stay alive. You don't, for people who are veterans, for people who have family in the military, like you don't want to see them blown up overseas. I know that you don't want to see that, and I know, and it's something that I don't really fully understand. So I try to speak, respectfully about it. I don't understand why people want to sign up and become members of the military. I don't really get it, because I see like what can happen. Uh, like basic training doesn't appeal to me. Being shipped all over, like away from your family, I think it is disruptive to early family life. But I understand that for whatever reason, there's a lot of pride in that. And that people do it, like my father, my grandfather, his father. There are people who are third, fourth generation military. They take a lot of pride in it. But when I see them talking about what they're proud of, I never see them say, like, they killed a whole bunch of Afghanis, including, like 2 kids. I don't ever hear anybody say with pride that they murdered women and children overseas. And so I feel like this is just like a default thing. When it comes to economic arguments, there's no economic theory in nuclear winter. It should be the one thing that we can all agree on. Libertarians, Marxists, card-carrying communists, nobody wants to be blown up. Just really basic default. Your tax dollars going to kill people overseas. Nobody wants that either. People are like, well, I think we should be taxed for X, Y, and Z. Who will build the roads? What about the hospitals and schools? I don't hear anybody say, what about the warheads? I need, I want to make sure that we've got enough nuclear strikes that we could just obliterate humankind. Like, those are not things we hear people talk about. I feel like anti-war is a really good unifying message for people, especially people who are politically active and have the tendency to polarize and compartmentalize themselves away from everyone else. Like, you can bring it back to the rest of humanity by being anti-war.
Oh, that is just awesome to frame it in the economic sense. It's like, all right, paying a person a low wage, even if they're low skilled, we could call that exploitation and mistreatment. How about murdering the person and their family and destroying all the shops that they shop at, ruining all their job opportunities and killing them? That is the ultimate exploitation. They're like, China's manipulating their currency. It's like, okay, that's bad. That might negatively affect workers, or if they have to compete with Chinese workers. You know what else hurts people? Mass nuclear winter. How about the
It's
bombing
bad.
raid? How 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 about J.M. Spate, the Air Principal Secretary of Churchill's ministry, saying, "We made the great decision of May 1914 to initiate civilian bombing with Frederick Lindemann's dehousing program." Lindemann comes to Churchill's cabinet and says, by these estimates, we could make the larger towns of Germany, that is, those with 50,000 or more homes, we could destroy up to 50% of the houses. This is a primary document from Max Hastings in his book, Bomber Command. This is how the middle class, this is how the working class, the average Joe, is treated in wartime. It ain't pretty at all, not to mention, of course, the soldiers. They tell us we need government to protect people in dangerous working environments. That's why we need OSHA. Then the government sends them into mass murder campaigns to get their limbs blown off based on lies.
It sounds absurd. It's like when I think about it, I have to really like work myself up to get it to sound like a really compelling, engaging talking point that's not silly. Because it's like, please don't murder people. It sounds like a goofy meme, but it's like the bare minimum that we should be doing. And it seems just absolutely wild to me that there are people who are like, I disagree. I feel like I know I can convince you. I can convince you to not kill people.
Well, and the best thing you can do is, well, try to convince them, but more importantly, make it unprofitable. That's what Jefferson Davis's thesis was as to why slavery existed in some areas and not others, not because the people here are bad and the people here are good. He goes, in some geographical areas, it's just not profitable. So if
Yep.
we make war less profitable, both in a social status sense, by making, by changing public opinion, and not having a government which has the right to print money and take money by force and conscript people and control the education system, lying to people saying all the wars are good. Well,
Yeah,
it certainly seems like libertarianism is the means to achieve the end of peace.
absolutely.
In 1992, Murray Rothbard had a thesis that the good right, the people who were good on principle, they were anti-welfare, anti-warfare, were infiltrated by William F. Buckley and the National Review. Buckley comes out and says the only way to fight the Soviets is to embrace a totalitarian bureaucracy within our shores. What difference does it make if we're ruled by a Georgian bandit or a Missouri ignoramus? And this is how the neocons basically took over the entire right. That's how we went from Ronald Reagan right wing to George Bush right wing. Um, I am a little concerned that this might be happening today with our alliance with the Trump people, that it might be watering down our message, and they might be saying, well, we need those 1% of LP votes, so we're going to bring them in, we're going to water down their message, and then we'll be able to get the votes. I love the Trump supporters, and I'm not bashing them at all. I love a lot of Harris supporters as well. I'm just wondering, as far as, is there any danger we're playing with by getting potentially too close to either party, but in this case, Trump specifically?
Well, let's break it down a little bit. William F. Buckley did the infiltrating, right? And I mean, who did he infiltrate? Do you have any thoughts on that? Like,
So
what was the
Rothbard's
policy?
thesis is that it was both media as well as college universities with the Young Republicans Club.
Yeah,
And the main, way he was able to get these connections is he did work for the CIA
right.
for 2 years, gets out, and then all of a sudden has these connections and conveniently advocates for state growth.
I think that at this point, the institution is completely captured. And so right now we're sort of in Uno reverse card mode. We are trying to get in and have some influence and make some change. I think the best way to sum it up right now, with like, Donald Trump has been really screwed over by a lot of people. Kash Patel had put together a really good documentary, and Kash is someone who did not come into the Trump administration going, rah, rah, Donald Trump, he's my best friend, I'm excited. Like, he was already in the field doing work. He does not agree with us on foreign policy, by the way. But I think he is someone that gives, from his perspective, like an honest, as close to unbiased as you can get perspective on the work that happened there and the influence and the actors. So he had a recent documentary that came out called Government Gangsters, and he describes the deep state swamp monsters and people who got around Donald Trump, were bad influences, people that Donald Trump thought like, oh, I'll pull you in, you're not part of the swamp. And then it's like, well, I wasn't, but I was persuaded by them to screw you over. He had a lot of people go after him and turn on him, and people who had ulterior motives all along. And now he is looking to form new alliances with people who are not going to screw him over. And it's essentially down to like a thin group of loyal people, right? Who were with him the whole time. Libertarians, small L and also capital L, and the Giuliani crowd. The New York people, like centrist-y Republicans, some Democrats, people who he's just known for a long time and didn't screw him over. I think that's really critical. I don't think we're going to stop the entire military industrial complex apparatus by influencing Donald Trump. But I think he's actually open. He's open to being influenced right now. I was able to sit down and have a face-to-face conversation with him about some really important things. Getting Ross Ulbricht, our political prisoner, out of prison. He's just totally agreed. I had two asks for him, essentially. It was Ross Ulbricht and Julian Assange. And Julian Assange was a maybe. And there was a debate at the table on whether or not that was the right thing to do. And there were other people there who were saying, yes, it is. You should do that. He helped you win. He helped you beat Hillary Clinton, all that stuff that he released. Like, that's really important. And he's not done anything wrong. And it's the right thing to do. And I was, really watching the gears turn in his head. He's open to being influenced, and it's a battle of libertarianism or people who are kind of scummy. People who don't mind seeing people blown up overseas. I think one of the things we need to do, I do not recommend that people leave the LP and join the GOP and try to fix it. I don't think that that's a good thing to do. I don't think that it's going to be nearly as powerful. I don't think that you're going to achieve your desired outcome. I think what you need to do is be a very cautious person who's like, well, I want to help. I would like to help find some peace in the Middle East. I'd like to pull back the United States. I'd like to bring our troops home. Let me help you on this. Let me give some advice. It's going to be a clash of opinions. It's going to be a battle of influence. We're not going to get it 100%. Don't give your 100%. You need to stay like principled anti-war, but also offer some advice and insight. And the worst thing that happens there is that it's not taken. But the best thing that happens there is that we save some lives. And maybe we're able to call off just 2 or 3 drone strikes over 4 years. Maybe his administration does almost the same that it did in 2016. But for the 2,000 or so people's lives that maybe we save, it'll make a huge world of difference to them. And if you get just a foothold in. The neocons, William F. Buckley, they were kooks. They didn't have the majority. You know, they were just like a weirdo think tank, and they got a foothold in. And sure, they had the help of the CIA, but they got a foothold in, and eventually they took the whole thing over. And all I'm looking to get right now is a foothold. Just want a foothold. We want to set very realistic expectations. You know, if Donald Trump puts a libertarian in his cabinet in charge of the Department of Education, which I think he is likely to do at this point, thank you so much. Now let's abolish this giant propaganda apparatus that normalizes, you know, the violence and horrible things that happen in public school, that indoctrinates people, that makes people, you know, want to go overseas and blow people up so that we can worship skycloth at home and pat ourselves on the back that we saved something and exported democracy. If we can kill that apparatus, I think we're much closer to having peaceful foreign policy. So I'm in it for the long game. I'm not particularly entering it with rose-colored glasses. I am someone who is willing to work on the real world trolley problems, make difficult decisions, but always do it for the greater good. And for me, what is the greater good means is, are we saving people's lives? Are we saving people's lives? If the answer is yes, then I'm willing to like wade into the swamp and start, you know, trying to hack some of those creatures to death, drain it a little bit, you know, dump a bunch of Clorox in it, whatever we can. Let's just make one little cleaner corner.
And I love what you said earlier about sort of giving Republicans a golden bridge to retreat across.
Yes.
They're not going to say, look, we've been wrong about supporting basically huge military interventions and increasing the budgets. Like, I'm not going to ask you to say that. I will ask you to say what you said. Can you just say, I'm embracing the pro-life, pro-family position.
Yes.
I'm now taking that position and extending it past the geographical lines, which politicians tell me I can only influence, and extending it to other countries. It's not even pro-democracy. March 31st of this year, Zelensky didn't even hold his elections. It's just ridiculous.
Well, you know, it's
outlawed
an emergency.
He outlawed 11 competing political parties. Men ages 18 to 60 don't have the right to leave Ukraine. There's a Berlin Wall in Ukraine. It's
an emergency. You know, that's what happens when you have war. All of a sudden, like all of your democracy rights, it's just, you know, emergency war powers. It's an emergency. Go to the front lines in your blue jeans. Oh, you're 14? Well, you know, pick up a gun or a shovel to bury your brother. Like, it's a really awful thing. I think we need to be very, very aggressive with the deep state, with the military industrial complex. We need to send a strong anti-war message, especially before the election. We need to make ourselves very visible, very public. Our vote matters. As libertarians, we are simultaneously the least likely to get elected and the most powerful voting bloc in the country. It's a very strange paradox, but you should lean into the power that you have. I think it's like you could make a huge difference.
Oh yeah, that is so important to remember, that while it's funny to say, haha, you know, you're only getting 1 or 2% every year, what losers? It's like, well, what are the margins of Trump's victories in the swing states that he needs? How about Kamala's victories?
It's 1%.
Yeah.
All that he needs is 0.5%. Do you make up 0.5% of the population? Are you a voting bloc that does that? I mean, like, if so, then your vote definitely, I hate to say it, right? Your vote actually might matter if it gets voted, if it gets counted. Well, you know, we're all nervous. That's a whole nother project I've got going on in Pennsylvania. But man, I'm walking a fine line here.
I would love for Trump, and hopefully there's another debate where he just goes right in, first of all, on the fine people hoax, which I'm so sick of hearing. I wish he'd spend more time on that.
Yep.
But if he could just be so passionate in this anti-war position and say why people on the left and the right, just as you have said, he goes, friends on the left, do you care about the little guy? The little guy gets blown to bits in war. People on the right, if you believe in civilization, and as much as I hate seeing videos of immigrants eating cats alive, that's bad. Mass murder is even worse than that. It's eating cats times 50,000. That's
Yes.
what we're trying to avoid. I would love for President Trump to answer when another country would be justified in invading America, blockading it, assassinating our politicians, killing civilians, and installing a new regime. This way, we could have a real principle as to when it's okay for the U.S. to do that to other countries. I'd also like him to answer why some countries are wealthy and others are impoverished, so I could get a good idea of where he stands economically. Next
Yeah.
time you're at Mar-a-Lago, ask him that for me.
Yeah, it's tough, man, trying to wield influence and not get, jaded. You just have to like take it in little bite-sized pieces.
Okay, so I'm convinced I appreciate the anti-war position, but I don't know if I want to spend the time and the money to go to this rally. Why should I spend the money and time to go to this rally? What are the best parts of these rallies?
Okay, so there are going to be people who are potentially going to be in Donald Trump's administration who are attending this rally. I need them to see this. They need to see it.
And this is the Saturday, September 28th, 2024 rally, the one that I'm speaking
Yes.
at?
Rage
Okay.
Against the War Machine. There are people who know former President Donald Trump who will be present there. They need to see this. They need to see how much it matters. We need to send a very strong message to everybody who's running for office right before the general election. It is critical that we have a large turnout at this event. We are still adding names. We actually have a handful of speakers who were nervous to put their names up in advance. So we're going to have some surprise speakers. One particular speaker who is coming in from out of the country. And you know how that is with visa issues and whatnot. So we do have a few more names to add over the next couple of weeks, and a couple that'll be put up last minute. But yeah, I'm very excited to host you, to host Scott Horton, Garland Nixon, Colonel Douglas McGregor. I think this is going to be an incredible rally. And by the way, because there is another huge event happening the next day, and that event has graciously offered us the stage for almost nothing. So that's why we're having them back to back. So it's dramatically decreased the cost for Rage Against the War Machine to share the stage. But there are maybe 40,000 to 50,000 people coming to the rally the next day. And everybody has been recommended to come to Rage Against the War Machine. So we're looking at around 10,000 people attending this rally, which is really huge. This has been mentioned on Charlie Kirk's show. Like, there's been a lot of outreach to the right in addition to outreach to the left. Russell Brand. I don't think it got a plug on Joe Rogan. The other one did. Brett Weinstein. There's been a lot of people. Some people are like, oh my gosh, that person can't be promoting our rally. They're not like anti-war enough. Well, we kind of need the people who aren't fully anti-war to show up and get educated. So like, what I don't want to see, here's like the level of disagreeability I see. Dissident left at the bottom, really struggle to get along with anyone. Libertarians, right above that, really struggle to get along with anybody, right? And then Republicans, and then Democrats who will just vote lockstep and just like hive mind, like, oh, Biden out, Harris in, TikTok dance, you got it. So I don't want our disagreeability to prevent us from doing outreach. This is an outreach event. There are going to be people there who are very anti-US involvement in Ukraine, and they do not feel the same way about Israel. Our job is to convince them. They are starting to move in our direction because they are suspicious. They are suspicious of government. And that's number one, right? They're a little bit suspicious. Brett Weinstein did a really good episode about like the weird IDF, like seeming to not notice anything when Gaza, like when Hamas is sending rockets over into Gaza. He was like, well, that was very odd. And he interviewed someone, and it's like, okay, these people are seeking the truth. So let's get in there and like really tell them, like, this is how it is. This is why you cannot trust the Israeli government. You're suspicious of the United States government. You can extend that suspicion across the world, my friend.
Yeah, he was interviewing a woman who worked in the IDF, and she said, "We would get notifications if a cat or a bag flew close to the perimeter, to the
Yep.
Gaza Israel border, then we'd get a light and it would start recording." Which, by the way, is like the Ring doorbell alarm system most people have. When you get close, this $100 item lights up and starts recording. But the $1 billion Israeli Defense Forces didn't recognize these
Strange.
paragliders.
Suspicious.
Brett
I wanna,
Weinstein's a
like,
hero. Yeah.
latch on to that suspicion, right? And just run with it.
Mhm.
Like, here's your top 10 reasons that you should not support the Israeli government's message, their PR work around their mass murder campaign in Gaza. I think that it's ripe, right? Like this Charlie Kirk, I've seen him be critical. What a wild timeline we live in to see Charlie
I
Kirk
saw that.
being
Yeah.
critical of the Israeli government on Twitter and them responding and basically saying they need his support. Like, guys, we are right at the precipice of waking up a ton of people to just this like BS propaganda campaign. So I'm excited, and I've caught heat. They're like, oh, you can't work with conservatives. You can't. I caught a lot of heat for working with the left in 2023. You, you're not going to make it so hot that I'm not comfortable with it. I am ready to withstand, the fires of Mount Doom, like whatever we need to do to wake people up.
So I definitely love going to these rallies and shaking hands with people, just meeting people who are like-minded. You could think of it once as, well, for the world's well-being, we're going to make our voices heard, and I'm doing this for other people. Also, don't be afraid to do anything for yourself. Read an Ayn Rand book. Doing things for yourself is totally okay. Go to these places and shake hands with people who are on the same page with you. The last rally was unfortunately canceled due to funding issues. One,
Yes.
is funding totally secure? And is the rally definitely going to happen?
The rally is definitely going to happen. Our funding is almost finished. It always comes into a down to the wire scenario, but the majority of our funding is in. So now we're really just paying the last of the bills, if that makes sense.
All right. And if you had to guess, how many people will attend and what reasoning do you have to justify the number you're guessing?
I'm going to guess about 10,000 people. We had about 3,000 last time. We've had a lot more promotion. I think last time we had a very aggressive promotion internally to our anti-war base, which is amazing. This time we have focused promotion externally to people who are a little more normie, to people who watch like, Brett Weinstein, intellectual dark web, that crowd, and conservative and like the Charlie Kirk Turning Point USA types. And I hope that does not turn people off in the anti-war movement. Just remember, like, your job is to convert them. I think we get so used to our bubble that we're like, like, I'm so excited to go and like tell all my friends about anti-war, but it's like your friends know. They already know. We got to
Yeah.
talk to the people who are not your friends. Maybe make them your friends.
Exactly. And just the concept of being afraid that people who really disagree with us will show up. What isn't that the goal? Isn't that who you're trying to convince? Aren't you trying to preach to a non-choir every now and then? Even when I saw there was like one Russian flag last year that Rachel Maddow was totally obsessed with.
Yeah.
And I remember going, oh, good. People with different backgrounds and allegiances are hearing the anti-war message. Not to mention, Russia's a great country with great people, just as Ukraine is, just as America is. I don't
Yeah.
know why there's this blatant xenophobia
I
against
mean,
Russia.
it's like, okay, go ahead and be really mad at Vladimir Putin, who, by the way, I have zero interest in moving to that country. It's not like people are like, oh, it's a Putin rally. It's a this, it's that. It's like, no,
Mhm.
that dude locks up political prisoners.
Yeah.
We're not a fan. But that doesn't mean that everybody in Russia agrees with him. It's not like a country of Vladimir Putin's. Everybody's an individual. And he does lock up political dissidents. It is tricky and challenging to speak out over there. So let's extend them some grace. And there are anti-war protests in Russia, of course.
Yeah, really. And let's lead by example. Yes, it's absolutely bad when they do it, not condoning it. It's just as immoral in Moscow as it is in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And what we can do is lead by example and be the shining city on the hill, as Mitt Romney would always remind us. So, one book, Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism by Scott Horton. I absolutely love that, especially if you only have time for one chapter. Check out the chapter on Syria. Absolutely mind-blowing. Angela, one article that you would recommend. People don't have time for a book. What is one article they should read?
Oh, it's the article about Oppenheimer reigniting anti-war suspicion with Japan in World War II. Oh, here you go. Oppenheimer reignites debunked arguments. Yep.
So this is really important because it turns out that the Japanese were actually occupying and colonizing both Korea and Vietnam. And once we took down Hirohito's empire, we also inherited his military conflicts and ended up fighting wars in Vietnam and Korea and murdered untold hundreds of thousands of people between Tokyo, Nagasaki, and Hiroshima. So there are not only upsides to getting empires to totally bend. Angela, where do I go if I want to check out details on the war? And where's it going to be? And what time on the war rally, anti-war rally? Where do I go? What should I check out? And when is it?
Visit rageagainstwar.com. It is September 28th in Washington, D.C., in front of the Washington Monument, also near the World War II Memorial, which I thought was a really cool location. It's going to be happening from 12 to 5 p.m. Please show up about an hour early. There are a whole bunch of security things that people have to move through. So you're going to have to get like filtered through because it's all set up for the day after. You can also find, I believe, a hotel block on the website if you need a place to stay. I believe that hotel blocks are going to be available for like another 4 or 5 days. So jump on that while you can. And we want to see you there. Bring your friends. Tell people, we're advertising to the local-ish population within like a 4-hour drivable radius, but we want to get as many people there as possible. Left, right, independent, everybody you know.
Thank you for watching Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone on X, formerly Twitter. Angela McArdle, thank you so much for your time.